The ancient city of Lowlan is considered by some people to be the most famous archaeological site in China's western region, where documents in the Kharosthi language were found. The most mysterious site in the area is the Little River Burial Site, called by some people the Small River Burial Site. The Taklamakan Desert is situated in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in northwest China. It is a vast stretch of dry wasteland where winds blow sand into dunes that are up to 300 meters tall. The name of this deadly and desolate desert, which is the size of New Zealand, means no hope of coming out alive. One Swedish explorer, however, was not deterred. Folke Bergman stumbled upon Lowlan while exploring the Taklamakan. And in 1934, he announced his astonishing discovery to the west.
Small River Cemetery has remained as a unique and only one in adventure history of the West until now. Those well-preserved mummies left an impression of sound sleep rather than death.
The Little River Burial Site contained 1,000 coffins, including one that contained the mummified remains of a beautiful woman with a charming smile.
You shall never forget the sacred expression of a female mummy. She is dressed in a noble way, with a yellow, peaked felt hat on middle divided black long hair. Her eyes are slightly closed, as if had just fallen into sleep. Her beautiful hook nose, slightly open lips, and obvious teeth left a permanent smile.
The first person to think of looking for mummies in the desert of Xinjiang was Awa de Ke, a nomadic hunter from the Lop Nur area. Awa de Ke was working as a guide for Sven Anders Hedin, another Swedish explorer, when he found the ancient city of Lowlan, an early hub for East-West cultural exchange. Decades later, Awa de Ke went into the desert again, this time with Hedin's student, Folke Bergman. He reported coming upon the site of 1,000 coffins, an even odder discovery than Lowlan. In the early 20th century, there was a rush to explore the vast northwestern region of China, but except for Lowlan, believed to be a post along the famous Silk Road of the Western Han Dynasty, 206 BC to 23 BC, nothing significant was ever found. After 1934, however, the history of ancient Xinjiang had to be rewritten when Bergman's book Archaeological Researches in Xinjiang reported about the large gravesite with its numerous well-preserved mummies, including that of the beautiful woman with the mysterious smile. The most astonishing thing was that she was so much older than the age of Lowlan itself, and she had Caucasian facial features. This discovery could rewrite local history. It was commonly believed that before the development of the Silk Road, the harsh conditions prevented people from traveling through the Taklamakan Desert, and that because of this, the development of Asia and Europe followed different paths. The Little River Burial Site, however, may be evidence of an exotic culture in the desert from remote antiquity. It seems to indicate that Europeans visited China even before the Silk Road came into being. But we still don't know what kind of culture they had or why it disappeared. Unfortunately, the burial site later mysteriously disappeared. When the Lop Nur area became a restricted military zone, Western explorers were no longer allowed there. People forgot about the site, and the account in Bergman's Archaeological Researches in Xinjiang became the last words written about it. The mysterious smile of the exotic woman with European facial features who lived in China long before the time of Alexander the Great enchanted people for some 70 years. Wang Binghua, then director of the Xinjiang Institute of Archaeology, also found the woman's smile to be unforgettable.
一种悬念呢很强烈，就很希望能进去，当然很希望通过自己的努力能够掀开一些新的边页。
The description in Archaeological Researches in Xinjiang shocked Wang. He wondered what this mysterious woman was doing in this Central Asia desert by herself and why she was smiling. He also wondered who the people were in the 1,000 coffins and what they were doing there. Solving the puzzle could shed light on the origins of the ancient Silk Road.
这些外文资料到底准确不准确？是不是像报告里边刊布的那么样子那个可信？就很需要呢到现场去验证这些东西，观察这些东西。
In 1979, China and Japan began working on a new documentary on the ancient Silk Road. This finally gave Chinese archaeologists the chance to enter the restricted Lop Nur area.
但实际上我们没走到，我们走了一条小河，也往前走了大概有半天左右的时间，实际上不是那个贝格曼当年曾经走过的河。
They didn't find the site, but Wang and the TV crew accidentally made another discovery.
在昆都河北岸发现了新的墓地，叫古墓沟，这是我给它取了一个名字。发现这里边的文物呢，跟贝格曼已经公布的，在新疆考古这边公布的一些资料，它是关系是非常密切的。
An astonishing female mummy was discovered in the ancient grave trench in Lowland, which Japanese archaeologists restored. The bronze-colored skin, the high nose, and the sunken blue eyes all indicated European origin. This finding added credence to Bergman's description of the Little River burial site. The body and excavated burial sites only represented the tip of the iceberg, but the site was yet to be located. For over half a century, the Little River burial site stayed hidden somewhere in the Taklamakan desert, but the world remained fascinated. A few months before his retirement, Wang made a surprising decision.
这样的愿望一直到就是20世纪快过去了，也没能够实现。后来一些偶然机缘呢，有些朋友愿意支持的往里边走，就萌发了这么个决心，不管什么情况一定要走到。
The winter of 2000 was exceptionally cold, with temperatures falling to -24 degrees Celsius at the end of December. Despite this, Wang entered the Taklamakan desert with 5 colleagues, riding on camels.
那个用最笨的办法，因为谁不知道怎么走，我们就选呢，根据贝格曼当年刊布的一个地图，然后选这个点的直线方向，向北的方向。
The scale of Bergman's sketch was about 1 to 2 million, which made it impossible to pinpoint the exact position of the site. Moreover, the dunes had been shifting for more than 6 decades. The burial site could have been blown away or thoroughly looted. Success was hardly guaranteed.
从1930年以后呢，基本上没有人再去过，到底情况怎么样，根本不清楚。
After identifying the approximate location, Wang set up a base camp at the northernmost point that could be reached by truck. They then loaded the camels with everything they needed, including Bergman's archaeological report and route map. According to the GPS, they were about 60 kilometers from the site. In theory, it should have been easier for them than it was for Bergman. But after 3 days, they were getting nowhere. Wang's mind drifted for a moment, just as Bergman's did when he got lost here long ago. It was as though the Swedish explorer was his spiritual guide, giving him directions from the beyond.
By now, I've wandered around Lop Nor of Tarim Basin for 15 days. The moor here is full of yardings, dunes, and Tarimisk mounds, which formed a huge maze. We found in surprise that we had turned round and round at the same place. After walking for a whole morning, we arrived at where we used to be the day before. 2 months have passed. What we've seen is nothing but wilderness. We are almost out of everything.
One night, the guide Awar de Kur woke up with a start from a nightmare about an evil spirit.
He said that little mountain with grave had disappeared in a newly formed lake and couldn't be found anymore. He then said that it was a place guarded by the devil, and anyone who got close to it shall die. I started to doubt whether such a place really exists, or whether he had really been there before.
Wang and his team members couldn't help thinking about how Bergman was somehow able to safely return after traveling alone in the Taklamakan desert. They began to suspect the burial site might have just been a mirage, an exaggeration of what he saw, or maybe even just a great story. Then, a rare, severe sandstorm came up, blotting out the sun and leaving them in the dark.
我坐在那个骆驼上面呢，现在也看不清楚方向。突然起大风，沙尘，那个眼也睁不开，根本看不清楚方向。如果继续往前走，一直是这种风，那我们是没办法到达现场的。因为冬天呢根本不刮这种风，现在突然刮了这个风，究竟怎么回事？跟常情是背离的，因此没办法预料。
Wang Binghua was thinking of giving up. Ahead was nothing but sand dunes up to 30 meters tall, and they took one step back for every 2 forward. They estimated that the burial site was about 30 kilometers away, but they only had enough food and water to get back home. Everyone knew that going back was the only safe choice.
我自己呢是倾向于就刹车，下次再来，因为后边这么多人呢，那个安全呢，现在感觉担子很重。但是没有其他人呢，没有一个人同意就放弃，说你不要担心，我们自己负责任。现在大家互相鼓励了，那个还是坚持往前走。
That mysterious appearing and disappearing burial site was so fascinating to the team that they couldn't give up. Wang courageously decided to continue another half a day. As the sandstorm eased up 3 hours later near evening, they found traces of the waterway described by Bergman.
We turned to a branch river of Quam Dara unexpectedly. This is a river without name, so I gave it a casual name, Small River.
At night, they set up camp by the river, preparing to return home the next day.
A round mound stands lonely on the flat desert, as if an ancient road mark. Judging from the distance, there seemed to be a thick forest of leaved poplars at the top of the mound. Everyone was just working on the new camp silently, without thinking about the scenery surrounding us. But Guide Alder looked and listened in a daze, as if he had walked into a dream. He stared at the round mound, without a word for a long time. All of a sudden, Alder pointed at the mound and shouted, "That is it!" Everyone was shocked. We all faced the mound before understanding what this is all about.
Wang and his team were finally standing where Bergman had stood 66 years before.
后来那个托老天的福，他们那个审核定啊，贝格曼他们测的图还是很准的，很准的，基本上没有偏离多少点点。那个一刻呢，确实是挺激动的，因为毕竟准备了这么多年，终于找到它了。
First, Wang carefully circled the site, making a record of the original state of the site. He then surveyed the sandy hill itself, which was littered with many oval coffins, which varied in size and construction. There were also bleached bones and mummies of children with light brown hair and pointed felt hats. The bodies were wrapped with coarse hide blankets, and there were straw baskets scattered around the site. After 66 years, the Little River burial site was once again discovered. The site appeared tall and straight amid the surrounding lower sand dunes. The hill was covered with wooden oar-like stakes inserted between the coffins. The upper portion of the stakes had been eroded, but they were still standing. Archaeologists in the 21st century with modern equipment had barely managed to survive, so the appearance of this ancient man-made memorial in the vast desert seemed strange. The archaeologists were left wondering where the wood came from, how many people were involved in the effort, and who built this memorial. They were still looking for the woman with the mysterious smile and the 1,000 coffins depicted in Bergman's book. But the answers had to wait for the efforts of Chinese archaeologists in the 21st century. Wang's team was forced to return after only a brief stay on the site because of limited supplies and fears that a hurried excavation would damage precious relics. They left after making a cursory survey. When he returned, Wang announced the rediscovery of the Little River burial site. His preliminary conclusion was that the site was at least 1,000 years earlier than the ancient city of Lowland. 3 years later, the State Administration of Cultural Heritage in Beijing officially sanctioned the excavation of the Little River burial site. Bergman's book, Archaeological Researches in Xinjiang, had caused quite a stir around the world because it showed that there was human habitation in the wilderness of East Asia in ancient times. The burial site of 1,000 coffins was not a mirage. Until 2003, experts were unsure about the nature of the Little River burial site and the woman with the charming smile that was 4,000 years old.
所以说，咱们说塔克马干是死亡之痕，唯一就是说塔克马干，实际上就是 地下的家园。我认为不是死亡的地方，有很多历史。其实塔克拉玛干就是一个历史，就是一个故事。我还抱着很大的希望，也希望我在有生之年能圆我这个梦。我自己也感觉到，可能我有一种什么欲望吧。
Idris Abdursul from the Uyghur ethnic group succeeded Wang Binghua as director of the Xinjiang Institute of Archaeology. In December 2003, the temperature dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius as he led a research team to the Little River burial site. But at least finding the site was no longer a problem. The team hoped their discoveries would help trace the footsteps of ancient human civilization in the Taklamakan Desert.
最震撼的，我们看了以后呢，因为到很多干尸有的干尸保存非常好，还有一些这个婴儿的，你给我一看那个小孩的脚那个指甲保存非常好，就像刚死了一样，而且他的这个斗篷毡帽还有一些木雕人面像这个地表上烙的非常好，所以我觉得这个。像5层的这样的墓葬，这么大的一个面积，2500平米，当时它高出地表是7米多。这个你要说一桶一桶的靠人把它两几边往下用的话，很费劲。
Whenever there was a windy night, the sand covered the day's work, and they would have to do it over the next day.
后来我们就想了个办法，用传送带。一层一层清理，传送带正好夹到两边，同时从周边开始往中间做清理，一层清下去，传送带往下挪一点，不影响下层的这个，这样就效果就很快了。
The conveyor moved the sand down the hill, forming a new sand dune. The next challenge was how to build an observation deck in the shifting sand. They needed the deck to survey the position of relics and to date them by level in order to ensure a proper excavation.
实际上，这个层位的意义就不大了。太荒，那个沙子根本你挡不住隔梁的，手铲一拨，哗，全部就流下来了。这时候层位关系怎么来确定，怎么处理，就大家都有点一筹莫展。
After repeated discussions, they decided to turn to an electronic device.
要全面一步的，全一步的在电脑上是个虚拟的探访，就是它客观存在，但是根本没有隔梁。拉线绳子拉上的，线绳子是隔梁吗？全那线绳子是隔梁的那个范围吗？
In spite of their high-tech instruments, work had to be stopped from time to time because of weather. The work was especially difficult, and they had yet to find the smiling young lady. The team hoped to learn more about how people lived in such adverse circumstances. Idris Abdursul was under considerable pressure from the State Administration of Cultural Heritage to make major discoveries, and his team depended on him to ensure that adequate supplies arrived from across the desert. Finally, some canoe-shaped coffins wrapped in cowhide were unearthed under the wooden stakes. They appeared to be crudely made of several pieces of poplar. On a windless Lopnur morning, everyone held their breath while the cowhide was torn off. The team had been eagerly looking forward to this moment. But Idris Abdursul feared the bodies would be too decayed, the coffins had been looted, or that there were never any bodies. The possibilities were endless.
结果第一个盖解开了，解开以后那个帽子毡帽出来了。 一看毡帽，刚看到毡帽的上部，保存非常好。太好吧？是啊。哦，你是这样说的，那这个在啊，对，我来捋这块儿，这个头多少？8公分。后来揭开第二个，第二个就到了额部了，毡帽这个露出来了额部了。哎，一看毡帽非常完整。 大家都很惊讶，这保存这么好。到了揭开第三个盖儿层，脸部露出来。我当时去的时候就心里想呀，会看见什么样的人？ 带着这种心情，因为它又离我们这么近，是吧？结果解开，解开一看，大家一看，啊，惊了，全场都惊了，哇，太漂亮了，太美了。 他的眼睫毛还是完的，哎，而且脸部，你让他那个毡帽绑的那个绳子，哎，痕迹还有，哎，那个重现非常清楚，鼻梁也非常高，你看呀，腿部也非常丰满，哎呀，这些全场那个心情没办法理解。
An eternally frozen smile peered up from the coffin. Everyone was charmed by the face of this young female mummy. She wore a cone-shaped felt hat. Her eyes were half closed, and her eyelashes looked like a pile of pine needles covered with a thin layer of sand. She was wrapped in a brand new linen cape with a straw basket on her abdomen. The coffin was made of 2 hollowed out pieces of poplar wood put together like parentheses, and it had no bottom. She looked as though she were fast asleep.
Really, 非常美，哎，非常而且非常丰满，哎，不可想象。 你想，这3000就是他上层3500到4000年这个，那个时候他活着的时候，该有多美，更美了。
Idris Abdursal named her the Princess of Little River. The discovery quickly caught the attention of Chinese archaeologists. Dunhuang, a professor of physical anthropology at Jilin University, rushed to the site.
那么从面部上的这些特征上来看呢，比如说它的这个眼窝深陷，它的鼻梁比较高直，而且鼻子比较狭窄，嘴唇呢比较薄，不是那厚的那种类型的，像这些特征都显示出它应该是属于欧罗巴人种的。另外呢，从它的眼睫毛和头发，我们可以看出来，它这个头发是属于亚麻色的。那么这种色调的头发，目前在世界上的各个人种中，只有欧罗巴人种才有这种头发。黑人和黄种人都没有这种发色，因此仅凭这几点，我们判定它属于欧罗巴人种的这个大的范畴。
This was the mummy of a European. According to anthropologists, there are 4 major ethnic groups based on the color of the skin, hair and eyes, and the shape of the eyes. They are Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid, and Australoid. The ancestors of the Europeans lived along the Ural and Caucasus mountain ranges, now the border between Europe and Asia. The Mongoloid race is thought to have originated from Central and East Asia. Clearly, the woman was not Chinese. She was the beautiful woman with the mysterious smile Bergman had described in his archaeological researches in Xinjiang.
The mummy has long dark brown hair and beautiful hooked nose, while the wooden sculptures shows obvious non-Mongolian characteristics.
Looking at her smiling face, Chinese archaeologists now know how Bergman felt when he saw her more than 60 years ago. As a European himself, Bergman must have found it strange to find the ancient body of a woman with golden hair and blue eyes in the heart of Central Asia. Even veteran Uyghur archaeologist Idris Abdursal found it hard to understand. We wondered how history would now have to be altered. The sample collected from the site was sent to Peking University for carbon-14 dating to determine the approximate age of the young woman's body. The test showed that the entire complex was 3,500 to 4,000 years old, about 2,000 years older than the ancient city of Lan, which was previously considered the earliest historical venue in the Lop Nua area. Sample analysis of the burial articles indicated the woman died about 3,800 years ago. China was then transitioning from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age. People had already begun farming in the Yellow River and Yangtze basins, and the ancient Chinese civilization was in formation. But the Taklamakan Desert had long been regarded as an area without any human settlement. With the discovery of the mummy, the local history of Lop Nua would have to be rewritten. Praise of the beautiful woman at the burial site was effusive, even though she was just a mummy from remote antiquity. More than her beauty, people were fascinated by the secrets behind her beauty. People wanted to know where she came from, what caused her death so young, and what her cultural background was. Bodies can stay well preserved as mummies for thousands of years. Famous Egyptian mummies are good examples of this. When these Egyptians died, their internal organs were removed and their bodies were dried, embalmed and wrapped in cloth. Thanks to the uniquely dry weather in the Taklamakan Desert, the miracle of mummification has preserved the eternal beauty of the Princess of Little River. The site has taught us more about the history and secrets of the Taklamakan Desert, but we can't be sure if these things were left here by chance or on purpose. These people may have been cleverer than we imagine.
小河墓地的这种胡杨木棺是没有底的，对吧？尸体是直接放在沙子上面的，所以它比较能够迅速让这个尸体中的水分，都被沙子吸收掉。另外，这个还有干燥的气候。 它直接放在沙土上，这很重要。如果要是在下面放一个棺底的话，用木棺底，那可能这情况就大不一样了。
From these findings, we now know that 3,800 years ago, people wrapped the bodies of their loved ones in a cape and placed them between two hollowed tree trunks tied together. Funerary articles such as straw baskets were also placed in the coffins. Many small branches were used as coffin covers, and the coffin was sealed with fresh cowhide. The tightly wrapped cowhide kept the sand out of the coffins, and the bottomless coffins provided an airtight, bacteria-free environment. In addition to the dry weather and low temperatures, archaeologists identified another factor that led to the excellent preservation of the Princess of Little River. When they removed the cape from the body, they found that the skin was covered with a sticky white gelatinous substance. They surmised that this substance was related to her preservation.
有一点，我们大家是一个共识，这肯定是当事人，至少他们是有意识的，认为这可以对尸体的保存有助于尸体的保存，所以他们才采取的这个措施。他涂上了以后，他就保存得非常好，别人没有涂上，涂上的地方保存得好了，没有涂上的地方保存不好，因此它是肯定是在这个对于干尸的保存起到了作用。
It was believed to be a special preservative that these ancient people invented to preserve the dead.
伊蒂利斯所长送到中国科学院的那个样品呢，最后得出来最后的一个结论，认为呢是一种奶酪这一类的奶制品。所以在小红墓地，棺材上蒙了那么多羊皮和牛皮，所以有牛奶和羊奶，这是毫无疑问的。 所以他们用这个羊奶和牛奶制成了一种奶酪状的这种东西涂在上面。
Everyone who has seen the Princess of Little River, including Bergman and Idris Abdursul, wonders why she was smiling when she died, and marvels at her calm and composed expression. The smile is just as enigmatic as that of the Mona Lisa. There are many questions about this young woman that we hope archaeologists can answer.
后来打开斗篷网，确实有一个发现，我一看，我说不对劲啊，这个，我一看它肚子有一边比较鼓，我说是不是这个因为难产或者什么而死的？ 大家也分析这个不好说，这个一般的干尸来说都基本上差不多，肚子是有些扁下去的这种情况，但是他这个又是朝一边有点鼓，你说是不是？我说是不是难产？因为难产而死。
At a grave site of a primitive clan in Chahugo, Xinjiang, archaeologists found fetal bones in the pelvis of a young woman, indicating she died during childbirth. This was very likely, given the harsh conditions in the desert of Xinjiang. The Princess of Little River died in great pain. As we know, a woman will endure great pain to bring forth a new life. And in her final hours, the princess was cool and composed despite the pain. It was a touching moment preserved by the desert. The Princess of Little River may have died while giving birth. Perhaps the locals honored her courage by covering her body with the white dairy substance. This prevented her body from decaying. To determine if she really did die during childbirth, archaeologists made the daring and interesting decision to X-ray her abdomen.
这种情况的话，我们不行，我们做一做 CT， 因为对骨髓我们一般还是没做过 CT， 所以最后后来我们就提出来做一做 CT， 更进一步的了解一下。这样的话，我们通过做 CT 要是真的是有孩子，那是不是死亡原因我们就更进一步的就清楚了。结果我们就联系了这个医院，就做了这个 CT， 结果一做 CT。 没有说怀孕的事情，他只是可能当时因为比较丰满，或者是因为关或者什么压着以后，把他肚子挤到一个形成了一个骨盆。
The Princess of Little River didn't die during childbirth. Her smile and calm expression at death remain a mystery. Her death was the start of a new life. Everyone fears the gradual loss of youth and beauty, and this beauty deserved better. Too much time has passed and there are too many mysteries to make it possible to interpret her smile, just as the smile of the Mona Lisa can't be fathomed. But her smile and her beauty are eternally fascinating.
How many years had this mysterious smiling princess looked down upon sandstorms? How many times had she listened to the resounding wind soaring in this palace of death? And when did she close her eyes forever, facing the bright moon and burning sun?
This woman in the wilderness of Lop Nua has fascinated the world for 70 years. But in his archaeological researches in Xinjiang, Bergman counted 1,000 tombs in the ancient tomb complex. The archaeologists were still unsure of the veracity of the claim. The team eventually discovered many similar coffins buried under the wooden poles. The locals used canoe-shaped bottomless coffins made from poplar wood, wrapped the coffins with fresh cowhide, and erected peculiar wooden poles over the burial site. This custom is unique to this area. Archaeologists also found straw baskets, the herb ephedra, willow branches, and wooden brooches in the coffins. Although not as valuable as the usual bronze funerary items of the time, they nonetheless provided precious evidence about a remote age. No pottery, stone tools or bronze items were found at the Little River burial site, unlike tombs in the middle and lower reaches of the Yellow River. But this doesn't necessarily mean that their culture lagged behind other Stone Age or Bronze Age cultures. The items made of wood and straw give a sense of loneliness and desolation. The site is a rarity, since no similar historical remains have been found anywhere in the world. It seems the 1,000 coffins described in Bergman's book is not an exaggeration. Now we can say we have found historical evidence from 4,000 years ago in the Taklamakan Desert. For a long time, scholars everywhere have been looking for clues to the origin of Lop Nur culture. The contents of these coffins may soon yield such clues.
整个这个立柱全部都是涂红的，当然现在我们去的时候上部已经封尸掉了，但是这个沙子埋的地方呢，你稍微把沙子拨一下，下面呢就全是用那个朱砂、赤石涂红的这种。当时应该全体那个通体是红的，当时要是这个墓被任何人动的情况下的话，这非常壮观。
Red was used all over the burial site, including red thread in the capes enclosing the mummies. The red colour made the site appear solemn and mystical.
This columned palace of Death God had been enclosed in bright redness. People painted the wooden silverniers red because their fear of magic certainly outweighed aesthetic pursuit. Redness is the color of blood, that is, the color of life. In their slumber, everything joined death loyally. Necessities in every symbolic object were prepared by their relatives. Every quiet night, numerous storms were soaring. Stars were hanging high. Every summer, burning sun cast light on their bodies. They were so lucky to own a peaceful resting place for a long time, until strangers one day came here and disturbed their long sleep.